Hello, everybody, and welcome to another edition of Through a Therapist's Eyes. We've got Mr. Neil Robinson in front of the camera instead of behind the scenes for the month in review. How you doing, sir?
I am doing fantastic.
Fantastic. And we've got the monthly man now, I guess is what I might call you, Mr. Adam Cloninger. How are you, sir?
I'm wonderful.
Did y'all have a good Thanksgiving?
Did. Wonderful.
Yeah. I cooked the best deep-fried turkey I think I've ever made. I was very, very happy with this year. I literally cut against the grain the dark meat with a fork.
He makes a mean
Nice.
fried turkey too. I've had it before.
Does he?
Yes.
Yeah, it was pretty. What did I say? Chicken?
No, you said fried turkey.
Okay.
Just a turkey.
Yeah.
I just didn't get invited, so I wouldn't know.
Well, I didn't have any this year. It's been like, what, 3 years ago?
Was it that long? Good Lord. Time just blows by.
When's the last time you cooked a fried turkey?
And maybe so.
I think about 3 years
Yeah,
ago.
because we're eating out stuff for Thanksgiving.
I think it was 3 years ago.
Mm-hmm. So this is the review, November month in review episode, where you get us kind of rapping about all the content that we had. I think we're going to get some good coverage of all the shows. So get used to this at the end of the month, the last week of the month, we do this and cover kind of all of it in shorter fashion and kind of see where we landed on each show. So the three shows that we're going to be hitting tonight were religious trauma, the effect on people, and then politics and a mental health. Is it a thing? Mental health trauma with politics. And the last one was, if I'm correct,
How to accept yourself.
how to accept ourselves. And that was actually, well, I shouldn't say that because I'll poison the thing. But this is where you get insight from a therapist and better insight from Neil and Adam about all of our topics. But being aware is not delivery of therapy services in any way. We're going to have a YouTube live thing in combination with the Facebook thing soon. We have the book out, Understanding... there it is. Therapist Through a Therapist's Eyes. That's why you wanted a book.
That's
I
why I
was
wanted
wondering
a
what
book.
you were doing.
I did this on my own. He didn't ask me to.
Re-understanding emotions and becoming your best self. Listen, it really helps us to get reviews on Apple iTunes, write a review, get the 5-star things, click the little clicky things that have us a thumbs up and all that kind of stuff. This is the human emotional experience which we endeavor to figure out together. So let's jump to the game that I want to kind of kick into once a month. The game is, what was your favorite of the three shows, the debate? Mr. Adams says, Mr. Neil says, let's come to a conclusion. I almost ruined it because I have a clear front runner in my mind.
How to accept yourself.
I think I liked one of the trauma ones. I like the excitement. I would probably say I actually like the political trauma one this time.
Wow, I thought we were going to have an easy consensus this time.
I think the political one is such a big deal nowadays that I like that content because it is so prevalent nowadays. But I think I would say that How to Accept Yourself would be a close second because of the podcast and what it is. But
yeah, and it just I've thought that one because I mean it just affects so many people. I mean if you can learn how to accept yourself, it addresses probably 90% of the stuff that we deal with. It's a big part of mental health. I mean it's just a huge part of mental health. But it's interesting. I love your choice, Neil, because people are afraid to talk about politics and
I hate talking about politics.
Right?
Or religion.
But it's an important.
I do, man. People get upset.
So you think the trauma aspect was actually like warranted? You believe in that? For the
political trauma and religious
political
trauma. We got two trauma shows.
Yeah,
Well, aren't we going to go over it in a minute?
we will.
Okay.
But this is the part of which one did you like the best? So he's posing a question.
No,
to you.
I'm still saying how to accept yourself.
Yeah.
That's what I say.
Yeah. But you were saying, Neil, asking him if he likes the trauma. I didn't understand your question.
Well, I basically said that he would basically agree with the religious and political trauma because he doesn't like talking to people about
He's
it.
trying to suggest that I'm going through trauma, and that's why I don't want to talk about it. But that's not the case at all.
Well, it's interesting. I'm going to love to hear your feedback on a comment on when we get to where we landed on the first show. But what are we going to do if we don't have a consensus? Like, who wins? I think you win, Adam, because I join your side of the.
Well, I mean, it's we don't have a even number, so there has to be a winner.
Yeah.
Well, I guess it doesn't. There could be three different.
Could be three. Yeah.
It could be three. We need to track this.
We probably
track
should
this down.
eventually, and I'd like to get polls up and see what the audience says. See what the
Oh,
community
absolutely.
thinks.
This is
Now
one
that-
where we need to
get
do
to
a
that
poll.
point. That'd be great.
We absolutely need to do a
Then
poll.
they'd just be reading off the results of the poll.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you know how to do that, I suppose.
I'm sure I can figure it out.
I know you can.
You have it for next episode?
Sure.
So we'll have a poll, and
Well-
you can play along.
Before next month's review.
So let's go to the first one. This first one was episode, no, not 208. Yeah, it was.
No,
Okay.
203.
203. This is 208.
Oh, episode
Right.
208 is today. Yeah, you're right. I'm getting used to my show notes. The show notes in this whole process is very, very different, which I guess I should give a qualifier. I got some feedback after the first month in review, and they felt it was a little bit like sporadic and difficult to follow. So this is a very different show. The audience, bear with us for just a bit, because even my show notes are very, very different. They're organized different. Our conversation's different. But bear with it, because I really think it's going to be the favorite show, like I said, because you can catch all of the content basically from this one show of the month. But it's weird for us, I think. And I've been doing this for 2-3 years or whatever. So to do something totally different like that is
It's been
is
over
weird.
3. Just so
It's-
you know, it was July 2019. I looked back on our Libsyn, and yeah, it was all the way back to July 2019 was like the first posting.
When Craig and I started. Dang, yeah, time flies, man. All right, so the first of the 3 shows was episode 203, Religious Trauma, the Effect on People. And the 3 questions that we had there that went with that is, do you know what a cult is? Can you imagine being caught up in a cult or in religious trauma? And then, how do you recover from it? That was the thrust of what I wanted people to be thinking about, right? So, what do you think about this show? What did you think? I mean, to me, it is a show that's pretty. So we did shows on religion before, but I tried to take an angle. John and I talked about it from a standpoint of just even modern day traditional church experiences that people really get caught up into, just bad or rough experiences in these things. And so I was really excited to talk about it with John, because he's a preacher. Did you know that?
I did.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He's a Navy chaplain, and I think he's a Presbyterian preacher, and he had a lot of really good thoughts through that episode. So, what do you guys think about that episode? What do you think?
You feel free. Go ahead if you want to.
I'm trying to let the guy who loves talking about religion go first.
No, I don't like talking about religion or politics.
I think we'll
You got to be careful talking about that stuff, because
Oh,
people
it
get
does.
upset. I mean, you got to be careful about when you talk about things like it, because I think humans in general like to think that the people that are around that they gravitate to are like-minded, and you got to be careful about that, because sometimes you say stuff or may say stuff not realizing you may offend somebody that's in the room or whatever. So you got to be careful about that.
Well,
Yeah.
yeah, and since no one talks about it anymore, you don't really know what people's views are anymore.
Right.
That's another thing. But
You don't know what their views are, and you also don't know what their experiences are. I feel like that there is a major silo issue, and we'll repeat that concept with the political trauma thing. But the reality of it is there have been people that have been massively harmed by this issue. And you're right, Adam. There's almost like a developing increased layer of like, I ain't talking about that. And I think it traps people into worse mental health. And it's interesting. I mean, the thought that I have actually right now is John kind of mentioned in one of our shows recently that the influence of religious experience has gone down in our society. And consequently, when you have mental health trouble in that area, then, you very much can't say anything about it. But,
I think he said, didn't he say the number of people that are religious have decreased?
Yeah. And it was during the political show, because now they're taking politics like a religion.
Right,
is what
right.
It was, but
I can see that.
I think the interesting thing about the show that was kind of neat was religious trauma isn't contained within like cults. And I think that's the part that people don't understand. They don't understand. But when you look at it from the outside looking in, and you talk to your friends that we talked about, like, I don't go to church because of this one experience, or I don't go to church because this happened to me, or something like that. It's really interesting that even your traditional churches, whether it's, Christian, Catholic, or whatever, they are very there's always that experience, like you said, Chris. Everyone experiences it differently, and so I could go to one church and have a great time, where someone else could say, "Yeah, I didn't like it because someone in the congregation said something or did something," or in John's case, he talked about that there was someone that was doing stuff bad, into the congregation, and you always have that because there's people in churches, and not all people are good.
Well, that's one of the reasons why I put that question, right? Can you imagine being caught up in this? And I think that what I really wanted to trigger the thoughts about as we went through that topic, this really affects a massively large swath of people that I don't think you would consider yourself in that process. And it isn't just being in a cult. I mean, that's, which is interesting because the other question was, do you even know what a cult is? Which I think we covered, before on this show, but did a good job in the beginning, front end of that. But this was really targeted at all those of us that are very much like sleuthed in our own mind about the frustration that we have, or the distrust that we have in organized religion and that type of a thing. And so this affects you out there. I'm thinking if you have discomfort with church, I'm thinking it affects you.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, there's a lot of people that just don't go to church because they have some bad taste in their mouth about something, or a bad preconceived notion about what they think it's going to be like. Because I think that's all. I almost feel like there's almost that too. Some people haven't experienced it but they've heard people talk about it, and so it's almost like trauma by proxy, sort of thing.
Well, vicarious trauma.
Yeah.
We talk about that for sure.
That's the term. I couldn't think of it, but
yeah,
I feel like that's almost the bigger issue now. Is like because a couple people have bad experiences, they talk about it, so then the other people don't want to go because so and so said they had this experience with it, and I think this does go back to people not following organized religion anymore, or it's become no longer the thing to do. And I think that does go back to some of the downfall in some of society because they don't have that outward faith or that something there to go to.
It's an important topic. I didn't say this on that show, but part of the cool month in review, I get to think of things that I didn't say. But honestly, everything I know about mental health goes parallel with everything, at least in a Judeo-Christian kind of view that I've kind of been a part of in my own journey, is parallel. The suggestions that are there, the ideas that are there, it's exactly parallel. There's really, I'm not going to say none, but there are very few, if any, inconsistencies about what you learn about living in religious circles and what you learn about living in mental health circles. Almost a perfect parallel, to be honest. So I'm jumping the gun a little bit just because I want to get to the question that pertains to what you were talking about. But Adam, when we talk about where did we land on this, I put out that thought that, if you've ever heard the statement, something like, I like religion, but not organized religion, right? I believe in God, but I don't believe in organized religion. Those kind of phrases. You've heard those before?
Yeah, that sounds like somebody's been through something.
That's my point.
Right. But I want to say something. You said something on that one show that I didn't agree with. Categorically didn't agree with.
Oh, wow. That sounds good.
I don't think you meant it the way you said it.
Okay.
You used the absolute. Always, never.
Yeah.
You said, and I'm not going to quote because I don't exactly.
Paraphrased.
Yeah, I'm going to paraphrase. I didn't write it down. But you said that probably the majority of people who weren't religious have gone through some type of religious trauma. I'm going to say that's not true.
Yeah, I'm going to say that's not true as well.
I think you probably meant a lot of times that's the case.
Well, it was with this topic. It's this statement. I think what I recall saying is really about this statement, and it's something that dawned on me when I was doing that show prep,
right.
Which is that statement where people will say, I believe in God, I've got a relationship with God, but I do not believe, I will not go, I have nothing that I want to have as an interest with organized religion, with some congregation, with a church of some sort. And I would submit to you, that's probably what I said, Adam. All those folks probably have some sort of experience that has really harmed them in some way, if not to the level of traumatic, at least to the level of very uncomfortable.
Well, there's also other cases too. I'll give you an example. Like my dad, he used to be a Sunday school teacher. And then one time he was like, you don't have to go to church to worship.
Sure.
So, and I don't think he had any kind of religious trauma or anything. I think it was just at some point in time he just realized, you know what, this is just not what's necessary. It's not what he felt was necessary for his beliefs, and he just didn't go anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and I think after the show was over, I think I talked about something like the issue is people associate the organized religion, the denominations and the churches, with what it really means to have a relationship with that higher power. And I think that's the harm that this does, the fact like you don't need a church, you don't need an organized religion to build a relationship with that higher power, because it is about your relationship with that, whatever you believe in. And that was brought up, but I feel like this really just hurts a lot of people from even having that as an option. And that's where you get a lot of people that just, the depression kicks in because they lose hope, and hope is so important to people. And so I just think that there needs to be a disconnect between organized religion and really the need for it to actually have that relationship with that higher power. And so that's something that was brought up after the fact. Like, it just sucks that it happens, because organized religion is a gateway for a lot of people to get to know something, but it's stopping people from even getting started.
Well, it's even a little bit more than that. How many of the things that you hear us talking about, how do you recover from depression? How do you manage anxiety? How do you deal with, alcoholism in your life? How do you deal with fill in the blank, really? And a lot of the suggestion, it's on the list here for how do you recover from religious trauma. And that is, don't do this alone. So one of the things that happens, Adam, is, certainly you do not need, organized religion experience in a church congregation per se to have a relationship with, your creator, whatever religion it might be. But one of the things we know about human beings is we do best when we're together. We do best when we're in a group. We learn better. I mean, if the three of us had a workout group that we did a workout routine after this week, this show every month, how many times do you think we would miss that? If I did that alone, how many times do you think then that I would miss that? That's a positive influence when you're in groups. So the thing that bums me out is you don't need some priest or some pastor, some lady, some rabbi to develop a relationship with your creator. I know there's some different beliefs, Catholic particularly, but you have a direct relationship there. But it's what happens with the group when you're growing and living and learning that gets lost. And then you're just off in your own, learning on your own, which is good. But when done together, and when somebody has some sort of distrust or some sort of crap that happened, resentment from years ago or whatever in your church, you then lose the power of what can happen in groups. Does that make sense?
Well, I mean, like you said, religious and mental health, what is the one thing they say in a lot of the episodes we talk about? Don't do this alone.
Exactly.
And that is right. And like I said, when you look at Christianity, it's about a relationship. And if you lose that, iron sharpens this iron. So if you're not with other people,
iron sharpens iron.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I mean, it's the reality, So yes, you're correct. The church or whatever it is, having those other people of like mind so you can talk about it in agreement and also disagree and figure out what's right and what's wrong is very powerful for yourself as a person. So yeah, I agree with you wholeheartedly.
It's funny. I think a lot of people are going to be hearing this about this show and religious trauma and being a part of a group, and they're going to be just like, I don't want to be around people. I don't like people. I mean, I hear those things in my therapy office all the time. Listen, another example that comes to my mind is you and I, Neil, I think we're aware of mastermind groups, and we love mastermind groups, right?
Yeah.
I mean, they're a powerful tool because a business leader gets into a group with other business leaders. I am a business leader, and I can tell you being a part of a mastermind group has made me so much better of a business leader and even a thought content leader that I am through a therapist size, because I have other people that I'm engaging this with and learning with and from. It exponentially increases your exposure. And when you're talking about learning about your religion and learning about your creed and whatever that it is, man, so much more happens together than it can individually. Adam, I'm curious what your thoughts are about that. Does that sound crazy, or particularly with your dad?
If that's what somebody believes, I mean, I can understand that could be beneficial, but you also got to remember other people who don't believe that. So don't want to leave them out either.
What do you mean? Don't believe?
I mean, there's some people that don't have a religion and they don't.
Oh, absolutely.
believe in that stuff, and so
Yeah, and they're unaffected, and people that are agnostic or don't atheist or just don't participate.
yeah,
That's fine. You certainly won't have any religious trauma that way.
it's true.
How are you going to have religious trauma in that circumstance? You just tune this show out and move right along.
But I think it goes back to what you said. Like even the mastermind that takes a religion out. But I think people still having a group of like-minded people, whether it's around a religious or I did GoRuck stuff. You got the weird Spartan race people. There's these groups of people that just like-minded hobbyists. Stuff like that. That it makes a difference in your relationship if you actually go out and you find people like-minded that you can talk to, that you can have relatable conversations. Yeah, you can learn from them. So while it doesn't have to be religious, I think it is important. You might be part of like a lawnmower remodeling club, something like that.
My lawnmower looks awesome, thank you.
I know, right?
That lawnmower is killer, no doubt about it. And if you don't know what we're talking about, you're gonna have to tune into some past shows where they can spend time on it.
But that's the important part. It's about those relationships, like you said, not being alone. Whether it's through religion, I mean, there's even people who do, like we talk about politics. Some people will volunteer a lot of the Democratic or Republican, type of things where they're with other people that have like-minded thought processes, and I think that's the important part to take away. That you really need that.
Right. You grow with it. You learn with it. I love your Spartans example. And again, Adam, we're not talking about people that don't believe or have beliefs. I'm really talking honestly a lot to the folks that say that kind of statement, like I believe in religion, but I don't believe in organized religion. Something's happened.
And I agree. I can see that would be, if they're saying that type of stuff, they're talking about something that's happened, that something made them think differently. Something like, let's just say they worked with somebody and they were religious, but they were selling illegal videotapes or something along those lines. Yeah. That would maybe do something like that.
Smack. That sounded a little revealing, but no, it is. And even though if nothing bad happened, also people will go into hypocrisy, and again block out something that was really helpful potentially in life because they're all hypocrites anyway. They're not gonna do anything valid in an organized religion environment. They say one thing and they go another. So, but if you think about it, how comfortable is it to really walk around your days and really feel the level of high distrust in your fellow man? I mean, we get so jaded and so negative, and then short circuit ourselves out from even having like friendships. Honestly, people will limit their contact in a friendship manner and just kind of hang with their partner, and that's about it. As much as you're able to develop the skills to get out to people, to get engaged with people, to have relationship with people, and particularly in a group setting, the better off your mental health is going to be. I will maintain that. So let's wrap up this review of show number 1. But how did we do, Neil, particularly, in understanding how do we recover from the crap that we engage in an organized religion setting? Do you feel like your minds are remembering and can review?
Yeah. I thought we did a really good job kind of recapping like how to deal with it, where to go for the help. Like I said, it's one of those things that's in the notes, and it's like the common theme is don't go alone, which is kind of interesting. Like we're talking about not going to an organized religion, but how do you deal with it without you being alone?
Yeah.
So, but I think we covered it really well, helping people. Like if you struggle with this, here's ways you can deal with it. Talk about it, get it out, talk to other people who are dealing with the same thing that you're dealing with. I think those are some key things to kind of help you get over this because,
like you said, any other trauma.
Yeah, just like any other
very
trauma.
Much is.
Yeah.
It's just specific to this one thing.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you, I think that there's a little bit of a hopped up thing with typical experiences with traumatic realities in our life related to the shame-based feelings. Now, shame-based feelings are weird to think about. Curious, Adam, how you would define shame-based feelings if I catch you on that. Because I'm wondering if your non-clinical brain, if that makes any sense. Like, what are shame-based feelings? Yeah?
My mind goes one way, but I don't think I should talk about it, and I don't even want to talk about that.
Okay.
because I'm probably way off, and you'd be like, "Oh man."
Well, that's okay if you're way off, unless you don't want to answer that.
No,
that's
I
fine.
probably
But
shouldn't. Yeah, I probably need to stay away from that.
Neil, what do you think in shame-based feelings?
Well, I think you go two ways. Is either one, the shame of something happening to you and not knowing how to handle that one.
Yeah.
I think that's probably where you're going with this one. Like if you're the one that had the thing that happened to you with the religious trauma, and then how do you circle back to that, to want to go back into that congregation or deal with those things, or it was my fault that this happened.
There it is.
That I'm trying to like.
There it is.
So, because when you deal with religious trauma, there's a lot of situations with like Catholic Church and the
Right.
priest and all those things, and then there's a lot just in. I think John talked about, like I said, in his congregation, there was a situation they had with one of the
With the
members,
sexual event,
right? And so, but yet, how do you recover from that? Because you're supposed to go to this place of safety. This happened to
Yeah.
you. It's my fault that this happened to me because I did something wrong, versus realizing it was still the other person. Then how do you get back into the congregation to
If
really
I
heal?
go to church, I am going to be judged. That's, I think, a
I don't remember
primary
you
fear.
talking about this on the other show. Did you talk
What's
about
that?
I don't remember you talking about this on the other show.
Sometimes we get extra content that pops up in my head. We may not have made a big
Okay.
deal out of it,
Right
but
on.
we did talk about shame and guilt in
Okay.
recovering from this, and I think that's a big part of it, because people, look, they're afraid of being judged. They don't want to be shunned or looked down on, and when you have some sort of yucky experiences with people, this shame.
Wait a minute, I do remember, because you went over this, but it's during political, because you were talking about
Probably
like
so.
the sandals that they wore and the robe they wore. And
Yeah,
stuff.
right,
That,
right.
I think that's where you went along those lines about
Well,
being judged.
And I think the other thing that John pointed out when we talk about shame is when you're in a congregation, something bad happens, the other people in the congregation might feel shame for not catching that this bad stuff was happening too. That was the other thing that John talked about. Like, it's hard for a congregation
Like I should
to.
have saw that coming.
Yeah, you should. I knew that guy and I excused it, or I knew that person.
I thought he
and
acted
excused
weird
it.
and I didn't say anything.
Yeah, exactly. So you had that shame of the congregation also letting it happen, not realizing how far it was, because you have rose, when it comes to church, you have very rose-colored glasses. I think you look at every other people in that church as like, oh, they're here and they're perfect.
Well, for that matter, you could have an example where you have somebody, well, I knew this one time, but I didn't say anything. I didn't know that it happened 50 times.
Right. So there's that shame too of letting it happen. I think, and that's both being the person that it happens to and the people that know that it happens.
Getting better at the tracking live a little bit. So Jill's with us. Hey, Jill, what's up? And David as well. But Julie points out hypocrisy is a huge factor why people don't choose organized religion. Exactly. You know, it's a big, scary reality that people are going to look down on me, shun me, judge me, and it's a mess. And it's unfortunate, because such good things can happen when people are talking in a group setting to really be just supported and cared for and loved.
I think it's very ironic when people don't go because they say they're all hypocrites, but yet they're judging them just as much as they would be judged themselves.
Oh, it's terrible.
It's
ridiculous.
kind of funny, that whole circle.
Which is not a religious experience, unfortunately.
But a non-religious person is not worried about throwing a stone either.
No.
So,
No, they'll judge you for other stuff.
Oh. But I always love pointing out, and then we're moving on to the second show.
Okay.
Judgment's good, people. Y'all way negativized being judged or judging. If I give you a compliment because you have a really cool shirt, Adam, I like your
Thank
shirt.
you.
Yeah, I was
You're
gonna say that
welcome.
too. I really like that shirt.
That is a
It's
cool shirt.
snazzy.
Usually I use a example that doesn't really fit, but this one really fits.
thank you. I have like 2 shirts that Julie didn't buy that look cool.
I am using good judgment. I am judging you when I give you the compliment about your cool shirt,
Thank you.
right? People are so afraid of that. It need not to be. Like, judgment is not a bad thing, y'all.
I think being judgmental is the problem.
Being
'Cause we
judgmental,
talked about that. That
different
goes
topic.
too far, and that's what
Yes.
we worry about. But yeah.
So the show number 2 that we went on to is show 205, How to Accept Yourself. And we really covered the 3 questions of, do you really like yourself? Why and why not? What makes it hard to overcome the critical self? And do you know how to achieve self-acceptance? I mean, man, I feel like those are 3 really, really good questions to ponder as we went through that show. So much so I want to repeat them, right? Do you really like yourself? Why or why not? Before you say, oh, of course, we know that human beings have insecurities. We know that people feel inadequate in some ways. We know that people are battling doubts and fears. So, yeah, you're going to like yourself, but how much do you like yourself? Because if you really, really like yourself, you're going to be what's called self-actualized, which I don't think any human being can really be there, right? So this is a tough question to really ask yourself. How much do you like yourself? Second, what makes it so hard to overcome the critical self? And do you know how to achieve this idea of self-acceptance? And this is the one I tilted on. Yeah, this is, I feel like, one of the most important ones because it's so broadly encompassed in mental health. So what are you guys thinking about that topic? That was your favorite one.
Mm-hmm.
Why did you like it the best?
Because I hate talking about religion or politics. I hate talking.
So
about
it was basically process of elimination.
Well, that and two. I mean, another thing is, I mean, I can understand how that you need to be able to do that. You need to be able to, I'm gonna say, accept your best self. I mean, you don't want to just say, well, this is the best I can do. I should just accept it. I don't think you need to accept your best self. You need to accept that there's certain things that's the way you are,
and strive for your
and
best.
strive for your best self. I think that's a good point to make.
Yeah, I think people almost get to that point where instead of, I think it goes back, you should strive to be better every day, like kind of that idea, that goal. But you also have to be okay that you are who you are.
Right.
And so there's that balance. And I feel like some people just kind of accept like, oh, this is who I am, and they don't try to do anything different. I feel like that's a common theme. And so this is kind of cool because it's about how do you accept yourself, and then it goes back to, okay, if you accept the way you are, but yet how can you still be better than you were? Just like even if you look at sports teams, a team could win the Super Bowl, but yet next year they still have to strive to be better and keep going. And so, and fans would not accept that, oh, we won it last year, we're good to go,
Don't need to improve.
Yeah, you don't need to
We're
improve.
good.
And so that's just, so I think this was a good show. I just enjoyed the topic of the political trauma. So I do agree that. Plus, I got to be different some,
A little bit. Yeah, I mean.
He's at work talking about politics. I can just see him now.
What's funny, Adam? Well, we'll skip around too much. I don't want to be schizophrenic. We'll get to the political one, but to me, I looked back at the show and I feel like we had a big gap that we didn't get to cover. And so I made a note to myself to do it now. So when you think about accepting yourself, and we talked a lot about the barriers, and the critical self is so damning to the way that we think and the way that we feel. But a lot of folks out there have a real reality of an issue with a mental health condition. And so we didn't get to talk about that because we just went off in a different direction, and that's okay. But Adam, I think you've probably heard me talk about it before, but I'm curious what you think I mean by a mental health condition. Gauge me with what the public might hear when I say that.
Well, I think some people might go ahead and think you're talking about a diagnosed condition.
Yeah. So it's coming through clear enough then.
Yeah, but at the same time, I think there's a fine line that you've mentioned before, or kind of skated around before. You can give a clinical diagnosis to something, but at the same time, kind of like you say, we figure this thing out together. That doesn't mean that you're not going to have a different kind of therapy session with somebody that has the exact. You can have two different patients, the exact same diagnosis, totally different view on how they need to be treated.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, there's social and emotional things. Each person is unique.
So I think some people think, well, this person has this thing wrong with them. You have to do this, and that might not be.
Yeah, like
these 5 things might be good, but these 2 things are definitely not what you need to do for the diagnosis.
You've got tonsillitis, so we give this pill for you specifically for tonsillitis. Right. Yeah. No, and thank you, because that isn't what we're doing, but. When you have OCD, you have OCD. Or when you have ADD, attention deficit disorder, or obsessive compulsive disorder. Sorry, try to get away from the alphabet soup that we put out
Thank
there.
you.
Right? Or if you have a level of alcohol abuse, there's specific things that we're looking at that's a biological reality. And my main point that I really want to drive home is that changes the way that you experience yourself. I just talked to a girl this morning in a session, and she thought she was depressed, and we deduced pretty quickly that it doesn't have anything to do with depression at all. She has what's called generalized anxiety disorder. I'm pretty convinced. I've only met her once, but I do know her from her family, and so I can be pretty confident in that in that layout. And she doesn't understand why she can't stop thinking. So much so that her irritability gets so high that she, she's mean to the people around her. And I see this with people, right? And then you feel like a bad person because you're literally so irritated. You're itching inside your skin. And here's the big thing, like, there's no shame in that. Like, that's not a fault reality. But you'll throw this all back on yourself and wondering, why do I behave the way that I'm behaving? And a mental health diagnosable condition, as you point out, is like the reason for the most part. There's other factors, but it's a reason why people are doing that. So don't beat yourself up. I mean, I'm passionate about mental health, obviously. And it breaks my heart that people just get tore up from self-criticism, and it's just because their body's geared in such a way.
So chicken or the egg? Which comes first, not accepting yourself or the medical condition? Or does it does one lead to the other? Does the other lead to the one? Like, it just, because I was kind of thinking about that. Like, if I go through and I had kind of a little bit rough upbringing and my parents were overcritical and I really had this negative self-doubt, is that one of those things that like would lead to depression, or would me having a condition,
I'd say possibly lead to
depression that then dictates how easy I can recover from that criticism? So that's the question I have for you as a therapist. Like, where do you see the
interchange,
the chicken versus the egg? Which goes first?
I call this a tale of two tapes. I've mentioned on the show before. On the one side, you got the genetic biological realities. This is a genetic condition from birth. But you also have nutrition and exercise. The body drives how we feel. But on the other side is the social and emotional realities of the primary life experiences, the primary life relationships, and the daily stress and the grind. So there is that combined approach. I mean, it all combines together, and then you're dealing with both. But, if you have the biological reality, which a lot of people just don't, their bodies do not have a diagnosable OCD, bipolar, schizophrenia, anxiety of several sorts issue that they're geared with biologically. Now, we all have a lot of something, learning disabilities or challenges. We all have life experiences. We all have troubled relationships. We all have tough daily grinds in a lot of ways, even in the States with first world problems, right? So we have plenty on both sides to kind of deal with. And our bodies also change throughout our life, by the way, outside of a diagnosable condition. So your challenge is trying to answer the percentage of influence, basically, Neil, right?
Yeah.
I mean, which is more percent? I don't know how we objectifiably measure that, which is why we look at both and deal with both in a therapy realm and parse it out so that if you have something going on, we can put a name on it. Listen, young therapists out there, listen, I've said this multiple times. I'll say it again. I hope you hear. Like, it is okay to put a diagnosis out there. I feel like that's what people are looking at us to do, and then to explain what that condition is, how certain parts of it affect you, and how certain parts of it may not. But that determines in a big way how you accept yourself. So I don't think we got to talk about that much on the episode at all.
Well, as a therapist, one of the questions I have going about the diagnosis, is it one that in your practice it's okay to change diagnosis, where you start where a patient starts with one thing based on what you know
absolutely
at the time, and then change it? Because that's the thing, I feel like some people will hit the diagnosis and that becomes so ingrained in them that like they're afraid to change it. But yet, and the reality is, as you dig deep, because I've heard you guys talk about, like, as you dig in with your patients, you're thinking this because of what you've been told, and then eventually as you dive into it, you start realizing,
pull more information.
There is something else to it. But so yeah, I think that's important to know too, that sometimes, and maybe some younger therapists might be afraid to label because it means that they can't change Yeah, exactly. But if you mislabel, then as you learn, I feel like you can relabel based on what you know at the time.
And there's some things that in what's called differential diagnosis. So there's some things where you'll start out with a lesser sort of diagnosis and then amp it up to understand kind of what's going on. Like there's actually something called adjustment disorder with anxiety. That's like a thing. And all it means is you're having trouble adjusting, and there's anxious realities around that. But then when you get to know somebody, you might bump that up because it's a bona fide experience with anxiety that's a condition. So there's differential diagnosis. And then there's also just straight up new information. I can't tell you how many times I've been in a therapy relationship with somebody, maybe for a year, and I never even know the trauma that they experienced the entire time that I met them with them. And then they let me know kind of what happened. And I'm like, oh, suddenly pieces start making sense. Now I understand why you're disassociating all the time. It's a clinical term, but you're checking out of your immediate realm of your experience. And now that disassociation makes a whole lot more sense to me. It's not related to anxiety. It's related to trauma. So yes, there's definitely young therapists understand it's going to happen all the time. We have so much pressure to, boom, snap out a medical necessity thing for insurance companies. It's stupid. More and more I get older, more and more I hate it. But, avoiding the critical self. Let me see. Where did we land? We landed on the idea that this is absolutely very, very common in therapy goals. Like I listed out, Adam, it was awesome. A lot of the different therapy goals that came real and right off of my intake sheet. And I thought about them, I'm like, man, these all apply to this idea of accepting yourself. I mean, it was amazing that way. And then we landed on the barriers that are so important to defeat. Where we had a whole list of barriers, but let's just jump on for a moment. What occurred to me as I was really thinking about this topic of accepting yourself. Having a critical person, an intensely critical person in your life, just crushes the soul. It crushes the spirit that somebody has. That to me, just I could almost take the whole list of things that we had and compare the effects that people have from all the others, and then compare it to somehow objectify it to that issue, and I think that would trump all the other ones.
I think some people actually think that someone's always being critical of them too. I've met people like that before where
there's fear
no matter
of it, yeah.
what you say, they think that you're saying something negative. You're like, no, I didn't mean that at all.
Do you think maybe they had someone super critical in their life early on? And I know there's also personality, because I know some people that are very defensive by nature, and I don't like knowing them and how they were raised. Like, I don't really see why you would be like that, but yet there is a nature verse that they have. But it makes you wonder, for those people, did they have someone super critical? So everything they did.
I don't know. I've met some people like, I hear something said to them, and then I see how they react, and I'm like,
yeah, how'd you get that?
What?
Yeah, where did you get that from what I said?
That's not what he said.
Or meant, or anything.
It's not even in the zip
code. I didn't take it that way at all.
But I agree with you. I think the human spirit, I think, is very resilient. But when you have someone that's very critical repeatedly, and you're slowly, it's kind of like that water over the stone that just gets worn down over time.
It's almost impossible to accept yourself.
Yeah.
Because you have a fundamental doubt and question of everything that is criticized about you. And I short of personality disorders, which is a whole nother clinical issue, I think, Adam, I would maintain anytime that you've had that sort of vibe with somebody, that really is an indicator that they have been repeatedly harmed in a way throughout their life from a primary person. And I'm not just talking about, daddy issues or mommy issues. I mean, those things are certainly potential. But when you have a very profoundly important person in your life, even like an uncle or another family member, or people have had friends in their lives, long-term relationships that are, it's an overused word, but that are toxic. When you have somebody that regularly and routinely in your life is obviously to other people critical of you, they can observe it, that's a huge, huge danger and takes a major hit out of that resiliency, Neil, that you mentioned. And it breaks my heart. Because I see this in therapy with people where they cannot get out from self-critique and then perceiving judgment and critique coming from others, like you said, Adam. I mean, it's terrible to watch.
I think sometimes they just have other stuff going on. They're just kind of set off.
Mm-hmm.
We talked about one time about road rage. Somebody, yells at you one time. It's one day it's okay, but another day somebody's already made you mad at work or whatever, and then somebody does the exact same thing. You're like, screw you, man. You just go crazy. So
those triggers.
Yeah,
definitely you get triggered. I want to spend a little bit of time on the solution list that we went with, because I think it's super important. Self-care, prioritizing self. I like my that's right. I'm seeing the show notes of what we did. It was like A1 and A, because they were so much the same importance. Self-care, fun, relaxing, enjoyable activities that are not self-destructive in any way. They're kind of like hobbies. That is a cornerstone of mental health. That's what I call that. But equally as important, I think that a practice of building on, one of you two said even during our conversation, celebrate the things that you do well, right? So you choose a standard activity that I will prescribe to people that everybody listening and watching this can do right now, starting today. And it's a totally important way to build up your view of yourself. You choose only one thing that you don't like about yourself. Only one. I know. I'll do a list of things you don't like about yourself, and people are like rattling it off. And then I'll ask, well, what do you like about yourself? And it's like,
that's it.
That's it. So you choose only one thing that you don't like about yourself and one thing that you like about yourself, and you celebrate that one thing. You feel good about it. Let somebody know it's okay to celebrate with people. And then you work towards changing that one thing that you don't like. And that may be a day's worth process for something simple. Weeks, might be months or even years, but you spend some time on making that a positive. Then you celebrate both of those and you add only one more. And as you replicate this over a several month period of time, you end up having 5 or 6 things that you really feel good about what I'm doing, and it picks up momentum. And it's so much easier to focus on only the one thing that you don't like, because you're celebrating 5. And how do you think you feel when you go to 20-1? If you really go through a few years of this, it's an awesome way. It's an awesome practice. I've done it in therapy with people to build yourself up. Then we also talked about learning to cognitive reframe. It's a vital part of CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy. Using
CBT?
Cognitive behavioral therapy. Okay. I said it, man. Okay. I said it. Didn't I say it, Neil?
We'll have to go back to the recording. Yeah, you said it.
Get the red flag commercial moment.
Yeah. Replay.
He said it and then he corrected himself. But okay,
pausing. That might be true. Yeah. Using friendship is huge in this category. Being able to get good feedback about something you're feeling doubtful about or insecure about. In a simple sort of way, before we turn the mics on, what did I ask you? Did I fix my hair? What did you say, Adam? You remember?
Did I say no?
I think it's probably...
He did.
No,
he did. He said I looked terrible.
I think the key to that is you need honest friends.
Exactly.
And that, I think some people have a...
Yeah, and you're honest.
I think that's the balance I think a lot of people have, is some people mistake honesty for being critical because they might not like what they hear. Doesn't mean when your friend is honest with you and they mean the best for you, that's great. But if they're constantly finding everything wrong and they just keep giving you that's when you get to that critical toxic. But I think
here's fine.
Yeah, look good, Chris.
You put that on your list of good things about
But I think that's something to think about, because friendships are good. Just making sure they don't get to toxic, because you don't want a bunch of yes men saying yes, 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 because that's almost more detrimental than an honest friend.
In an involved relationship, you develop trust and you develop the honest ability to be like giving real objective feedback when you need it. But I'll tell you, guys struggle, men out there, like particularly young men, we just love coming up with the quickest jib, jive, poke, who can have the best cut down, who can come the best wittiest thing, right? And I would tell you, honestly, I think that can crush some people. I had to learn how to deal with that. It didn't come natural. I mean, I don't care. I know my hair looks good, Adam. There's not a whole lot that you're going to be able to do to hurt my feelings or whatever. But particularly younger adults, you all remember those years? That could be tough for young kids, for young folks.
But my youngest, I was told by my mother that my youngest got a little bit too extreme with some of his sarcasm, which I can't blame him. He gets it honestly from me, but he hasn't understood the social dynamic of I've gone too far.
Right.
And so that's the thing he has to work on. But yeah, I mean, that's true. That's how guys build their friendships, and they get really, they like, oh yeah, you put a little bit extra weight on, or someone sits in a chair and it breaks and they start joking, oh, you put too much, it's just the way guys are.
More than one person over Thanksgiving tapped my belly. Oh. That's the first thing my brother-in-law did. Hey, Eric out there, by the way. It didn't bother me. I'm okay. But the point really there is friends can all very much help build you up. It's a huge component of accepting yourself. Mentioned the feel-good file, tracking, keeping note of things that you do well or things that you do well, success stories, success moments. Check the anxiety experiences that you have clinically out with people, and then putting validating people in your life and being able to banish or at least discredit or minimize those ones that are toxic or negative. So I thought those were some pretty good pieces to that show. And the last show, episode 206. Neil, here it is, man. Politics and mental health, political trauma. Is that a thing?
The moment you've been waiting for.
Best show of the month.
Political trauma. Man, I don't even know if they're done down in Georgia or not. It's poor people. We recorded the show probably right after our election cycle, knowing that they had a month to go out of Georgia.
Isn't it like December 5th or something they're going to do?
Is that when it is? So we still got a whole another week for those poor people.
3rd or 5th or something like that where they're going to do the...
When is the...
I don't know. I have to look up the Georgia runoff.
Yeah, I think it's like
December
or something.
Yeah. The Georgia runoff is still not even done.
So you're saying the people in Georgia right now are probably going through political trauma right now because it's not over.
It's miserable. Miserable for them. Because they keep on getting it and keep on getting it and keep on getting it, all of these political commercials and all of this.
December 6th.
That's what I'm saying.
December 6th, it looks like.
December 6th is Georgia runoff.
That's close.
I didn't say the date off the front end of the show. This is November the 28th, right?
When is it going to come
November
out?
the 28th. You get a whole another week to go, Georgians. I'm sorry, but by the time this comes out, you've gotten through it. I like talking about politics. Can I say that out loud?
Sure.
Just don't express what they are. You can say you like to talk about it. Just don't say what your political opinion is.
I have significantly diminished the amount of people that I'm willing to do this with. But Adam, I'm going to say you're one of them. Right?
That you're willing to speak about it or not?
With you.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, because we've had some conversations.
Yeah.
And I think that's super important and valuable to be able to do. What's the laugh? He cracked a
Don't worry,
smile.
I gave you some jabs too.
Like immediately.
Well, I'm just thinking of some of the conversations we've had, because I've gotten to know you more about how you lean now, and then like knowing how Craig, like when you get Craig involved too, is a whole nother dynamic as well. So yeah. I think you and I have talked a couple times about some things with some of the stuff, and I think that's how it should be. You should be like, here's what I think, here's what you think. Okay, you're wrong. That's fine. I'm not mad at you, but. That's how it used to be. When you were talking about politics, it was here's what I believe. Here's what I believe. You guys kind of talk about it, and then if someone says something that helps you kind of sway your opinion, you might shift what you think. But now it's a here's what I believe. Here's what you believe. You guys are both evil to each other because you think I'm wrong. It goes back to the defensive nature that you were talking about. Yeah. If you don't agree with me, then you're basically saying I'm an idiot and we're going to argue, right?
Yeah. Yeah, it sucks because just like the religion reality, this as well, in much the same fashion, locks people into being alone with their own views because you can't talk about it. And listen, I don't talk about things all the time in my real life, though my wife would probably disagree with that statement. LOL. But it's okay because,
I've got a story to tell you after this.
mic's off, Adam. Mics need to be off. I don't know where he's going there, y'all.
It's a funny thing. I'll tell you later. Anyway.
But no, I mean, when you feel like you can't talk about something, you can't deal with something openly, then this is just yet another way to kind of lock yourself by being alone. Here's the questions that I asked to think about when we went through that show. Is politics good or bad? I think they're good. Frankly, they're necessary. Also, have you thought about what politics even really are? So when we talked about that, it's interesting the way the definitions have changed, or the thoughts that people have about what politics are different now than they used to be. And then how to cope with the stress around you and the conflicts and disagreements and that type of a thing. I even think that this is going to be one of our lesser downloaded shows. I think we'll statistically see that play out. And I don't understand that. I don't even think people are going to tune into that particular show as much.
The politics show?
Yeah. And I haven't looked yet, but I'll make a $5 bet with either of you or both of you that it will probably be in the bottom quarter of our downloaded shows, I think. Because people don't want to deal with it.
They're tired of talking about it.
They don't want to deal with it. What do you think?
Other than him, he wants to talk about it, but
well, you do too.
I could see it going either way because I think there's a lot of people who won't listen to it because they might think they're gonna get hurt by it because we might say something that maybe they don't agree with and they don't like it. So I think there's gonna be a lot of avoidance because of that. But I think there is gonna be a lot of avoidance because there are a lot of people that are kind of like, okay, I'm just tired of it because it is so extreme. We talked about religion has now become politics. It really has been. And I think that goes back to why
that was John, a really interesting idea from John.
And I think part of the reason why it is so dynamic or explosive nowadays is because people put their political beliefs on such a high pedestal that we used to put our religious beliefs. So when you disagree with me on my political spectrum, you're basically disagreeing with the very fiber of my being. And I think that's because you almost get that from a lot of people where if you don't agree, it does become such a defensive, anger moment.
And science the same way. Science has become like the new religion too.
Yeah.
I mean, you can have a belief, I say belief. You have thoughts of how you think things are. There's certain things that's just theories.
I think people just need to get back to church.
Oh wow, there's a value statement.
But you're correct. The last couple of years, science is up there with politics, which used to be religion. It's really kind of an interesting dynamic.
John had a very interesting view about that. I was really wanting to listen to him more. I don't know that we had time to go into it, but his view, because he's seen it for so long, and he's seen it from the angle of being a pastor, as well as being a therapist, as well as being just a Christian religious person himself, and then being in the military for as long as he was.
He has such a diverse background. Like his insight is so crazy. But I think going back to are politics bad? I think politics as a whole, the idea of the deciding for the greater good, I think is a good idea. But I feel like the way politics has shifted, it's no longer about what's good for the greater good or society in general. It's about winning arguments. It's about basically just saying, I want to get what I want to get, not is this really what's good for my county, my state, my city, my country. It's about just winning for the sake of winning. I feel like law has become that type of a thing, and politics are right up there with it. And I think that's where politics are good, but I think they've shifted to be something worse now.
So that's the way that we need
evil.
To end the show. And so I want to circle back around that. Yeah, Adam, it's a necessary, but is it evil? Is it good or bad? I think where we landed with our panel, Neil, is that it's not bad. It's not bad at all. But we have demonized it to be something that is inherently bad because we're so combative and polarized. We had a good talk, back and forth. Kasie said a lot about social media and that type of thing, the influence on our way that we get news. I mean, that can't not be a part of that conversation, but We also landed, I think the panel really agreed with me. Remember, Neil, we were talking about 9/11. Well, you listen to this. Remember, Adam, we were talking about 9/11. That is a really powerful experience that changed the way human beings operate. I think they very much agreed with me as that being a major, major issue. And then
in the U.S.,
huh?
I'd say that in the U.S.
No, that was a worldwide event.
No,
I
I know,
disagree.
but I mean,
I disagree.
I'm gonna say that there's other things happen in other countries that to them were as bad or worse to them. In the U.S., yes, 9/11.
I think that is probably a true statement. But if you think about it, we all watched the Queen's death proceedings in a lot of ways around the country. Outside of the United States, there are things that happen in the States that people don't give a rip about. Just like we don't give a rip about some of the things that happen in other sectors of the world. But when something's big like that, and something like that happening in the United States, I'm going to submit to you pretty much around the world, OMG, the United States got attacked on their mainland was around the world, universal. We all watched it. And that did something to the human psyche about how we are all dialed into something that's really important. I think that was big.
No, I agree. It was big. I'm just saying that I think we're kind of biased by saying is from the U.S. So
Yeah, it was definitely egocentric. Well, Americans are egomaniacs. We think the world revolves around us. Apologize about that around the world. Sorry about that. It just happens. We try to be humble, and we are humble people, I think, in a lot of ways. But no, Adam, maybe we're on a disconnect here in just a little bit. What I mean is, in a fundamental way around the world, even, did it change the way that we consume news that's important to us? It gave us the experience that we watched it live and all day and just got sucked in more and more throughout the day. It was all day long. It was exhausting. And I don't think that we've ever experienced that before, even in World War II. When the war was going on and stuff, people didn't have that technology. We couldn't do that. We had news reports
well, I can see that
at a 5-minute clip.
Well, I have a question for you two because of the age difference. How much were you in? How much was involved with the Iraqi war in Kuwait with the first George Bush? Because I kind of remember that a little bit, but because of my age, it really didn't matter to me as much. And I think I was 7 or 8 around the time. But when 9/11 came, I was just out of high school, and it was that was my first, to me, that's a huge thing.
It was different. It's a good question, Neil, because of the age. I remember exactly, Adam. I don't know if you know exactly where you were, but it was one of those, I remember where I was moments. I was at Respecs as a bagging grocery clerk, going in and out of the store, delivering them to your car, when I found out we went to the Gulf War. And I finished my shift. I do not recall if I checked the news after that. I was in high school, but it was fine. It wasn't let me watch the Iraqi war on TV. Now, there was that capability, but I don't think that human beings really knew how to use that yet, or were accustomed to that it hadn't been ingrained into that's what we're going to do. Do you remember, Adam? I'm curious.
No, the reason I don't is because for me, it was the U.S. is always putting their foot in somebody else's business anyway. So, I just thought another day in the office.
But
I thought, really.
Yeah, and I think it goes back to what you guys said. Technology has changed dramatically. I think 9/11 was one of the first the biggest event as technology was available. So it did become a worldwide thing because the technology allowed it to be that way. And then the news cycles, and then social, Facebook, MySpace, those were starting around the same time. Google was becoming a bigger thing. A lot of the news places started actually having their websites out there. So, technology changed the dynamic of that event. You talked about the Queen's death and those types of things. It's a lot different. And I think you've said it many times, is we as a human society really don't know how to handle technology yet.
No,
at all.
Mentally, emotionally, going back to dealing with conversations. And I know one of the things you talk about where you land, was that idea of that one-on-one conversations going away, because everything is buffered.
John was big on that, wasn't
right. Everything is buffered by technologies to where you have all this information that you can decipher for yourself, but you don't really have the capability or the discipline anymore to have real conversations.
I'm just curious, Chris. Have you ever sent a text to one of your kids and they're upstairs?
Oh, I do that. I do that.
It
I do
happens. It
that.
happens.
Hey, I'm in bed though. I gotta say, I'm in bed usually when it happens.
My wife just told me that the other day because she's like, "Go yell for the kids." I grabbed my phone. She's like, "Why? I wanted you to yell for them." I'm like, "But when I was growing up, I was like told not to yell, and I didn't want to get up." And I'm just like, "I'll just text because I know they have their phone." But yeah, that literally happened to me. Like I think last night or 2 nights ago, my wife's like, "Just yell at them."
Same
just
here.
yell
But
for them,
she
make
knows
them
it's
come up.
difficult to yell through the walls or whatever. She said, "Well, you tell him to turn the bass down," and I knew that means text Aaron, tell him to bass down because it was too late.
Of course, I get the point. Like, you just text them yourself. Why you like?
Exactly.
Because now you're the jerk instead of her.
Yeah.
Hey, I've been called a nice jerk before.
So wrapping up, Neil, where you went to on this show, that I thought, well, we got to do that for sure. How to cope. Here it is again. Kasie talked about marriage and understanding how to deal with conflicts, and I talked about group dynamics, and I think we didn't get a chance to talk enough about group dynamics, but we were blending those ideas together to broad stroke it out and give us a macro look at how do we want to deal with these things, because we need to learn how to do that, or actually relearn, I think, how to deal with some of those things. Limits are crucial in today's world. Nobody disagrees with that. Do face-to-face conversations, ... only, right? Neil, you just mentioned that. Vote. If you're in a country that allows for voting or participating in some way in the providence that you're in, or what your system is, participate in your system. It feels enabling. It feels empowering. And otherwise, take other actions. Again, moves towards empowerment. Join groups so as to not be alone. Practice patience. And Neil, where you ended there, that I wanted to end up, John passionately ended our episode on political trauma, kind of talking about his vast experience in the military. And do you remember what he said, either of you? Because it was poignant and powerful.
Talking about the people that were his brothers and sisters?
Yes. And what they have grown to understand about their purpose and what they're serving, right? And I think that we would do well to understand that, particularly as the United States is able to help so many people around the world. We need to do more. But, when you're dealing with these types of decisions in whatever country you're in, if we have in mind a service to a cause greater than ourselves, and you instill that into the conversation that you're having with a person or a group, you're going to be much more adept at dealing with really difficult problems like our national debt, or what we're doing with the new Providence leader in your local government, or whatever it might be. If you come at it from where John and his companions in the militaries, and I'm sure that's the same around the world, that we're serving something greater than ourselves, you're going to be much more engaged and grounded in that conversation that you're having. I think that was a pretty cool way to end.
Yeah.
Yeah. And in a word, yeah. So we'll stop it there. Guys, have a great week. I hope you enjoyed the November month in review. Adam, we'll see you around Christmas time.
You continuing the beard out? You're gonna wear like Santa costume, and we can have you like.
Okay, wear a Santa hat.
There you go.
Hope the holidays are going well for you guys. Merry Christmas is soon to be right after this show gets publicized. So take care, be well, and we'll talk to you soon.